Daniel Pink, welcome back to the show.
I am so glad to be here, Dan Harris.
I feel just the same way. How many people have brought you on the show and said, like, I have no regrets about booking you on the show? I mean, how many dumb jokes along those lines have you dealt with?
You know what? When you had the last name Pink for 6 decades, you get used to the dumb jokes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been 30 years since that people say to me, hey, did you ever see the movie Reservoir Dogs? So I have a tough skin for most things, including bad jokes.
Got it. Yeah, because I get the, I'm 10% happier just seeing you.
Good Lord.
I have nothing but sympathy.
Good Lord.
All right. So on the subject of regret, just a very basic opening question here.
Yeah.
Why this subject for you?
Well, for me, it's because I had regrets. I had regrets of my own, and if there was a moment, and I'm not a person who has epiphanies or pivotal moments in life, but this one sort of came close. In that, a few years ago, our elder daughter graduated from college, and so we're at this college graduation, and it's very long, and I'm spacing out, and I start thinking about my own college experience, which was generally positive, but I had some regrets. I wish I had worked harder. I wish I had taken more risks. I wish I had been kinder. And I'm sort of having this out-of-body experience at this graduation anyway, wondering how this kid who was just born is graduating, how it's possible for someone as youthful and vital as me to have a kid who's graduated from college, Anyway, so all which is to say is but I was thinking about these regrets, and I came back to Washington where I live, and I very sheepishly began mentioning them to people because I knew that nobody wanted to talk about regrets. And I discovered that everybody wanted to talk about regrets. That I had this kind of whoosh, you're a journalist. It's like there's certain things where people say, "Oh, that's really interesting," and there's certain things where people say, "Oh my God, I need to tell you," And anyway, to make a long story longer, Dan, I actually threw away a book proposal. I actually stopped working on another entirely different book, wrote a new book proposal, and decided to spend a few years exploring regret.
When you say you regret not working harder and not being kinder, can you flesh? I don't know how deep you want to go on this, but are you willing to flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah. So let's say kindness. In college, and even this is like one of my own big regrets, and it's something that I actually think that I have learned, in a positive way, I've learned from. I've extracted lessons from it and done better later on. But in college, sometimes people aren't nice to each other. And I was in situations where people were not being treated well. And I wasn't the person bullying them. I wasn't the person mistreating them in any way. But I was there, and I knew it was wrong. And I didn't say anything. And it still bugs me. And so, with regret, the question is, what do you do about that? And at one level, and this is the whole way that we reckon with regret, you can say, oh, no regrets. Never look backward. Or I can wallow in it and say, oh my God, I am the worst human being there ever was. Or I can say, wait a second, this is a very strong signal I need to listen to and learn from and do better next time. So that was that's one on kindness. There were a few. I was on a trimester system. There were a few trimesters where, I didn't go to class that often, where, I was doing other kinds of things that 20-year-old men sometimes do. So, in retrospect, I might have, during those kinds of moments worked a little harder.
So the biggest regrets in your life come from college?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No. It just so happened that the locus, so the thing is, I'm at this graduation, and it's, I don't know how old your kids are, but they're not as old as my kids, are they?
No, my kid is about to turn 11.
Okay, great. All right. So you'll get there. But the, there are these kinds of moments in a parent's life, and time seems to move really fast. And also you're in a big auditorium and you're sitting there and it's boring and your mind starts wandering. And that's what it was. So my regrets are not all about college. I have plenty of regrets about everything in my life.
You used this phrase a moment ago, no regrets. The beginning of your book is a kind of Jeremiah against the philosophy of no regrets. Why is that a wrong-headed? I think you actually say you call it life-thwarting nonsense.
Yeah.
So what's the beef?
First of all, I just want to acknowledge and tip my hat to the just airdropping that 50-cent word Jeremiah into our conversation. I do admire that. Second,
So many people. Actually, I just got to jump in. I never interrupt guests. I really try not to, but I have to tell you, one of the big regrets in my life is being the kind of asshole who drops too many 50%.
No, I disagree. I actually really like it. I don't know if I've ever said that word. I've certainly written it. And actually, no, this is completely orthogonal to what we were talking about, which is that it made me think that, oh yeah, it does. That word does come from Jeremiah, the way you pronounce it. I usually see it in writing, so I actually learned something here. But anyway, no regrets. Yeah, here's the thing. It's like there's this idea out there. I mean, you've written about happiness. You've written about like how do we become satisfied in life, and you have obviously a nuanced understanding of that. But there are other folks out there who are sort of peddling this idea that the way to be happy, the way to have a good life is to be positive all the time and never be negative, and to always look forward and never look back. And that's just bad advice. It's unscientific advice. And so here's what we know. We have 60 years of research on this emotion of regret, research in many domains. Not only, it's actually started in kind of game theory and economics, but moved to neuroscience and cognitive science. And what we know is that regret is one of the most common emotions that human beings have. It is ubiquitous in the human experience. Everybody has regrets. The only people who don't have regrets are, little kids whose brains haven't developed the capacity for counterfactual thinking, people with certain kinds of neurodegenerative disorders, and sociopaths. Everybody else has regrets. And so we have this I think the puzzle here is that why? Why would something so ubiquitous be so unpleasant? And the answer is because it's useful if you treat it right. And the way to treat it right is not to say no regrets. I had people, we'll probably talk about this later. I had people who filled out, I asked for people's regrets from around the world. And I had people literally fill out this survey saying, I don't have any regrets, but 20 years ago, I bullied somebody and I can't stop thinking about it. So you have this kind of performative positivity that I think is not the path to a life well lived. The idea, again, as I mentioned before, is not to ignore your regrets, put your fingers in your ears and say, no regrets, no regrets, no regrets. But it's also not to be toppled by them and wallow in them. It's basically to look at them as information, as data. And when we do that, we have a lot of evidence that it's a transformative emotion.
I want to go deeper on that, but let me just stay with the life-thwarting nonsense for a second. The phrase "no regrets," I've never really used it, but I don't really know what it's referring to. Is it basically saying it's dumb to look back at the dumb stuff you did in the past and regret it, or is it about living a life where you live so fully that you have no regrets?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question. What you typically hear is people who say, "Oh, I don't have any regrets. I don't have any regrets." It's foolish to think about regrets. It's foolish to look backward. It's foolish to think about things you've done in the past that you regret. I'm positive all the time. I don't have any regrets. And that's just not true. I mean, that's not the way our brains have evolved. Our brains have evolved to experience regret because regret is useful. And so that's what I think that there's some research on this as well. Prospectively, you can live your life to reduce your regrets, but I can pretty much guarantee that most human beings at the end of their lives will still have a few regrets because that's who we are. And actually because of that, regret makes us better.
So either way, you're using no regrets, retrospectively or prospectively.
I'm using it mostly retrospectively. When you say to people, "What are your big regrets?" and they say, "I don't have any regrets because I'm positive and everything happens for a reason, and it is foolish and against my best interest to ever look backward." And I'm just saying that's unscientific. It's terrible. That's a terrible way to live your life. The science contravenes that significantly.
It's not only unscientific, but it's especially, in situations where, for example, a child is talking to a parent about some mistreatment and the parent is refusing to take accountability because they're embracing a no regrets POV. It's infuriating and unfair.
Absolutely. It's not. That's a great point too. It's not fair to the people. It's not fair to the people around you, but it's also just, it's just not, it's almost like we've been, as I mentioned before, we've been sold this bill of goods. We've been sold a bill of goods that the path to a life well lived is to always be positive and never be negative, and to always look forward and never look back. And what the evidence tells us is that we should be positive a lot more than we should be negative. Our positive emotions should absolutely outnumber our negative emotions, but negative emotions are functional.
Yes.
They're there for a reason. And we haven't, I think, especially in America, we haven't done a good enough job equipping people to reckon with their negative emotions, to acknowledge them, to name them, and to learn from them.
Technical question. What is a regret, actually?
Well, okay, so a regret is when you look backward in your life. You look back and you wish you had done something, you wish you hadn't done something, or you wish you had done something differently. It is different from, sometimes people get confused between regret and disappointment. And I'll give you it's sort of a simple-minded example of that, which is, a simple example of that. I don't know if it's simple-minded, which is, let's say that so I'm looking out my window here in Washington, D.C., and it's actually a nice day. But let's say that it were raining. And at this time I wanted to go for a run, but it's pouring rain and I couldn't go for a run. I can't regret that. Okay, I don't control the rain. Now, let's say that I wanted to go somewhere. I knew it was raining. I was going to rain. I didn't bring an umbrella. I can regret that because that's on me. So there's some agency in it. It's not about external circumstances. It's about your own volition, your own choices, your own decisions, your own actions.
You don't need a personal trainer to hit your 2026 goals. All you need for a personalized workout is Fitbod. I just downloaded the Fitbod app. It's really cool. They have this great and simple onboarding process where you talk about what your goals are. You describe your gym or your home gym, the equipment you have, the equipment you can get access to, and then the app spits out a really detailed workout regimen for you. I work out alone at home, and figuring out what to do every day can be a gigantic pain in the butt. And so Fitbod is extremely helpful in this regard. I mean, one of the challenges is not only figuring out what routine you want to do on any given day, but also how not to be repetitive in a way that might lead to injuries. Exercising is often at the top of the list at the beginning of a new year, and if exercise is on your list, I think Fitbod could very well be extremely helpful because it gives you good, vetted information and guidance, and has lots of features that will help you stay on track. Fine-tuned by experienced, certified personal trainers to bring best practices and exercise science directly to you. Achieve New Year's resolutions and learn new movements the right way with over 1,000 demonstration videos. Level up your workout in the new year. Join Fitbod today to get your personalized workout plan. Get 25% off your subscription or try the app free for 7 days at fitbod.me/10%. That's fitbod.me/TENPERCENT. You've made a nod to this in this already young conversation several times, but I'd be interested in hearing more about what, again, the book is called The Power of Regret. So what is the power? What are the benefits of tuning into this thing some of us try to avoid?
Okay, so that's a great question too. And so so here's the thing. We have this emotion, we have this negative emotion. It's adaptive. It's there for a reason, all right? And it's there because it's an instructive emotion. And what we have is a pile of evidence, mostly from social psychology, showing, for instance, okay, you put people into a negotiation. Here we go. Great, long line of research. You put people into a negotiation session, all right? They negotiate. They come out of the negotiation. The researchers say, what do you regret doing or not doing in that negotiation? Right? You invite the negative feeling. Those folks do better in the next negotiation. It helps on problem solving. It helps on strategizing. It helps you make better decisions in the future. It helps you find more meaning in life. We have just piles and piles of evidence that when it's reckoned with, it's not dismissed, and it's not, a source of endless pain and smothering. But when we actually reckon with it, it's a transformative emotion. It helps us learn. That's what it's there for.
So, for example, on the decision making, if I can keep my regrets top of mind, not in a wallowing way, but in a learning way, well, then I am going to make smarter decisions and make smarter moves in future negotiations, et cetera, because I'm aware of past pain points.
Right. And that's exactly right. And it's also, yes, and it's also sort of, again, well, I'm going to go back to this idea of emotions and negative emotions. Like, emotions are signals, all right? They're there for a reason. And so we can either ignore them, we can feel them, or we can think about them. And so when we experience an emotion like regret, what we need to do is use that as a signal. Now, there's actually a good evidence-based way to reckon with that we can talk about. We have a particular regret that involves basically treating yourself with compassion, talking or writing about the regret, and then explicitly extracting a lesson from it. But at a broad level, absolutely, we should be these negative emotions are there because they're there. They're knocking on our door saying, "I want to teach you something." And then the response is not to ignore. I don't hear a knock. That's a bad response. But it's also like diving under the couch is a bad response too. Open the door and acknowledge it.
I do want to go into that system that you just described, but let me ask one or two high-level questions first. In the book, you lay out these 4 core regrets. Yeah. Can you walk us through those?
Sure. Let me tell you how I got there, because I think it's going to be instructive. So I set up this thing called the World Regret Survey, where I invited people all over the world to submit their big regret. And we very quickly assembled a database of over 26,000 regrets now from people in over 130 countries. And what I found is that when I analyzed those responses, basically short paragraphs about, paragraph from all over the world. We had this in Chinese, we had it in Spanish as well. I found that people ended up around the world with remarkable similarity, like having the same 4 kind of regrets at a deep level. And I think that tells us something there too. I mean, I can tell you what those are if you're...
Please.
Yeah. So one regret was what I call a foundation regret. A foundation regret are small decisions that people make early in life that accumulate to terrible consequences later on. So I spent too much and saved too little, and now I'm broke. I didn't exercise or eat right. Now I'm profoundly out of shape. We had a surprising number of people. I didn't study hard enough in school, and now it's like I actually don't have the skills that I need to do well in life. So that's a foundation regret. Boldness regret, very interesting. Boldness regret is a big category. People look back on their lives and they remember being at a juncture, a moment where they had 2 choices. They could play it safe, or they could take the chance. Play it safe or take the chance. And what's interesting here is that the domain of life didn't really matter that much in all these things. The domain of life didn't matter that much. What mattered was being at that juncture and choosing between safety and taking a chance. And overwhelmingly, people regret not taking the chance. Not all the time. Some people regret taking the chance and having it go south on them. But overwhelmingly, people regret not taking the chance. And it manifests itself like this. I stayed in a dead-end job rather than starting my own business. I have hundreds of regrets about not asking people out on dates. Hundreds. Astonishing number of those. Regrets about not speaking up for something that mattered. Regrets about not traveling. Basically, regrets about wimping out. And it really sticks with people. Third category, moral regrets. You're at a juncture in your life. You can do the right thing. You can do the wrong thing. And when people do the wrong thing, most of us, most of the time, regret it. Because most of us are good. And most of us want to be good. And most of us feel shitty when we're not good. And so the big things there were bullying, huge numbers of bullying regrets, and an enormous amount of marital infidelity. So that's moral regrets. And then connection regrets, the 4th category, are you have a relationship, often not a romantic relationship, but including romantic relationships, but the full spectrum of relationships. It was intact or should have been intact, and it comes apart. And the stories that people tell about how these relationships come apart are generally undramatic. They kind of drift apart. And so one person wants to reach out and they don't because it feels awkward. They think the other side's not going to care. So they wait. And sometimes it's too late. So I have all kinds of stories about people who wanted to reach out to a friend they knew was not doing well, and they call and they realize the friend has passed away. All kinds of regrets about friendships that have drifted apart, and nobody wants to make the move and saying, hey, I'm thinking about you. How you doing? And so we have these four. So just to recap here, we've got foundation regrets, if only I'd done the work. We have boldness regrets, if only I'd taken the chance. We have moral regrets, if only I'd done the right thing. And we have connection regrets, if only I'd reached out. And it's just really remarkable. If I were to show you the data set, it basically looks like a giant spreadsheet, and show you the regrets that people expressed, I don't think that you could tell where they were from. I don't think you could tell a regret from Milwaukee versus a regret from Santiago, Chile.
Is there one of these categories that is the most, and this is probably the poor deployment of this word, the most popular?
The biggest numbers were the connection regrets and the boldness regrets. Okay. Now, I also did, again, not to get in the weeds here, I also did a quantitative survey of the American population, basically a giant public opinion survey, a very good piece of research, looking at American attitudes about regret. And one of the big takeaways there was, and here I can make this claim very, 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 very strong, is that one of the big takeaways there was how much over time people regret inactions over actions. That is not even close. That is a slam dunk. It is so overwhelming. In this quantitative work, I looked to see if there were demographic differences in regret between, say, men and women, between people of different races, or even things like introversion, extroversion, belief in God. And there weren't very many demographic differences. It was kind of surprising. But when it came to age, huge one. What we had is that people in their 20s tended to have equal numbers of regrets about action and inaction, equal numbers of I regret something I did or I regret something I didn't do. Over time, as people age, not even close. Over time, people regret their inactions much more than their actions. And that's consistent with the boldness regrets, I should have taken a chance, and the connection regrets, I should have reached out.
Yeah, so I guess I'm an outlier. I mean, I'm older. I'm in my mid-50s. My regrets are mostly sins of commission, bullying in particular.
Okay.
Or insufficient kindness, similar to yours.
Yeah.
You know, just moments where I didn't speak up or just do a little thing that would have made a big difference for somebody else.
I mean, both of those are commission and omission. I mean, you have there are people like me. Like my regrets of kindness are inaction regrets of kindness.
True. Fair enough.
But Dan, I mean, this bullying thing is a big deal. I mean, we have people who went back, and I did it. So in this World Regret survey, I wanted it to be anonymous. So I asked people for their gender, for their age, for where they are and their regret. But I also gave them, because I wanted some texture for the writing. I gave them the option of opting in to list their email address if they wanted to do a follow-up interview, if they were interested in doing a follow-up interview. Okay, so pure anonymity, but they could opt in to give me their email address. So figured if I got a big enough sample, 2 or 3% would give me a lot of people to interview. 32% of people opted in. So it's like so that tells you like how much people like want to talk about this.
Yes.
And it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to share my big regret with a complete stranger. And oh yeah, I'm going to give him my email address so he can talk to me some more about it. So among the many follow-up interviews I did, I interviewed this woman, 50 years old, in Kansas. She talked about bullying a kid on the bus when she was like 9 or 10 years old. She was crying in this interview.
Yeah,
she felt so bad about doing that. So it's a big deal. We've had people go back and try to find the people they bullied, like using Facebook or social media, and in some cases the bully is more traumatized than the bullied.
I've tried to find this one kid that I bullied, and I've also been approached by a kid who bullied me. That was in person. But yeah, I really resonate with that. So the book gets very practical about how to deal with regrets. So I'm just going to go through, some of your suggestions. You start by talking about this pair of options: undoing and at leasting. Can you unpack that?
So that's for action regrets. So one reason that action regrets don't linger as long is we can do something about them. Okay, so undoing would be I bullied somebody and then I went back and apologized to that person and made amends. Like you can make somebody whole. I hurt somebody and I made them whole. The other thing that happens with action regrets is there's some really fascinating research on counterfactual thinking here that undergirds this, is that with action regrets, you can find the silver lining. Okay, so here's what that means. Regret hinges on counterfactual thinking. There are two kinds of counterfactual thinking. You can imagine how things could have turned out better, and you can imagine how things could have turned out worse. So how things could have turned out better, that's an upward counterfactual. How things could have turned out worse, that's a downward counterfactual. And what we know is that downward counterfactuals make us feel better. And they don't make us do better, but upward counterfactuals, regret, help us do better and make us feel worse. They make us feel worse and help us do better. And they make us do better because they make us feel worse. They help us do better because they make us feel worse. But at least, let me give you an example of that. So downward counterfactual is, okay, from the survey. I shouldn't have married that guy, but at least I have these two great kids. I married that guy who was an idiot. That's a big mistake. I should never have married him, but at least I have these two great kids. And so you sort of make peace with that. This idea of upward and downward counterfactuals is clear. It's in this study from about 35 years ago that's been replicated several times, which is you show people in an experiment photographs of an Olympic medal stand, okay, the people who are receiving medals in the Olympics, and they have to simply evaluate how happy the people look, okay? Get gold, silver, bronze, how happy they look. And so invariably, the person who looks the happiest is the person who won the gold medal, because they won a gold medal at the Olympics. But the second happiest person is overwhelmingly the bronze medalist, because the bronze medalist is doing a downward counterfactual, saying, at least I finished third, not like that schmo who finished fourth and doesn't have a medal. And the silver medalist is the least happy person up there, even though they're in second place, because they're doing upward counterfactuals. If only I had pedaled harder, I would have gotten the gold. And so, again, regret is because our brains are amazing. All right, our brains just do these amazing things, and one of the things they do is travel through time, change events, come back to the present, and it's just incredible. And so it's a superpower in a way. And so, again, upward counterfactuals make us feel worse but help us do better. But downward counterfactuals are useful. They make us feel better, and sometimes it's good just to feel better, even though it doesn't help improve our performance.
Fair enough. Another of your recommendations, and this kind of harkens back to your articulation of amazement at the fact that so many people not only wanted to fill out your survey, but speak to you, a stranger, about it. Another strategy you recommend in the book is disclosure, getting it off your chest.
100%. We have a lot of evidence about that, and let's explain why that's the case. So, because I think that helped me understand this. So certainly disclosure there's an unburdening there. You're sort of lifting the weight from your shoulder, and that's certainly true for moral things. But the other thing about the disclosure is that we have research like from Jamie Pennebaker at Texas showing that when we write about these things, there's evidence that if you write about your regret for 15 minutes a day for 3 days, it helps defang it significantly. And the reason for that is that our negative emotions are blobby, they're amorphous, they're vaporous. And when we write about them or talk about them, when we name them, we sort of they become more concrete, and therefore they become less menacing. There's research out there showing that writing about writing about your negative emotions is helpful. Writing about your positive emotions isn't always helpful, because you want to just have that general glowy, amorphous thing. If I were to say, or you were to say to me, list 17 specific reasons you love your wife, it sort of takes some of the charm out of it. You know what I mean? And so, so there is a big argument for disclosure. The other thing that we care about, what we're concerned about with disclosure, is that we fear that when we admit our mistakes, when we disclose things that we're not necessarily proud of, that people will think less of us. And there's some pretty good evidence that, not all the time, but most of the time, people think more of us. They actually admire our candor. They admire our they admire our courage. And so there's a very strong argument for disclosure, and just wrestling these amorphous negative emotions to the ground.
Just to say to the listener, I interviewed Jamie Pennebaker, who's really the granddaddy of journaling for dealing with difficult emotions. And so I'll drop a link in the show notes if people want to go deep on his work. But Daniel, you talk not only about journaling for 15 minutes over 3 consecutive days, but also about you can call somebody, or you can even talk into the voice recorder on your phone. There are lots of ways to unburden.
Absolutely. The key here is going through this kind of transformation process. It's basically taking something that is amorphous and blobby and making it more concrete. And words are more concrete than this kind of dull, vaporous feeling. This is one reason why like cognitive behavior therapy often involves naming the emotion that you're feeling. Because when we name things, we sometimes feel like we have dominion over it. But to me, it's like it aids in the sense making.
Absolutely, because you take something it's kind of a background static of regret or shame or fear, and you put a name on it. It just feels much more workable.
Yeah. You can see it like if you, like you can hold it in your hands in a way, metaphorically, rather than just feel this menacing cloud above you. And that sense making is extremely important in looking at it and then extracting a lesson that you can apply in the future.
Another recommendation in the book is to create a failure resume. What is that about?
So this is an idea from Tina Seelig at Stanford, which I love and I've done, and I sort of have a refined, a somewhat edited view of this now. So here's what I did based on this idea. So what you do is you make a resume, you make a list of all of your failures, setbacks, screw-ups, blunders. All right, but you don't leave it there because it's not an exercise in self-flagellation. Then you say, what lesson did I learn? Then you have another column that says, what lesson did I learn from this? And then the third column, what am I going to do about it? And so what you do is you take these things that sort of linger in our head and you memorialize them, be specific about the lesson you're learning from them, and then have a specific action you can take afterwards. Now, doing this over a lifetime, this is painful. Doing it over a lifetime, I don't recommend that. What I do recommend is people to take, say, 5 failures, setbacks, screw-ups, list them, say, what'd you learn from them? And then what are you going to do about it? For me, when I did this more massive, comprehensive list, what I discovered, and it was actually super helpful to me, was that I was actually making some of the same mistakes over and over and over again. And it helped me surface that. It really did. Because when you look at the lesson, it's like, oh, here's that lesson again. Oh, here's that lesson again. Oh, here's that lesson again.
There's a reason why in the military they do after action reports.
Absolutely. Exactly. 100%. And I'm a big believer in that. I'm also a big believer in, again, using our brain's time travel capabilities of also doing a pre-mortem on things, where you base, again, our brains are amazing. You know that. So you're planning out a project. I do a pre-mortem for basically every important project I do. What you do is you think about, you say it's 3 years from now, and this project is a complete abject disaster. What went wrong? And you literally list, you get in your time machine, you go to the future, what went wrong, and then you list the things that went wrong. And then, because it's, in many cases, it's easy to anticipate that. We didn't have enough budget. We didn't get the right people on board. We didn't have approval from the regulators, whatever. Make that list. You get back in your time machine to the present and don't do those things. you know, and so a pre-mortem is I truly do it for every single project that I do. So it's another
So,
way. It's another way to sort of because we can also anticipate our regrets. That's another thing that we can do. We can anticipate our regrets and construct our present day to try to avoid them.
yeah, so in the book, you use this expression regret optimization framework. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I mean, regret optimization framework was an idea that was popularized by Jeff Bezos, who had famously had a story where he was contemplating starting Amazon. This is back 30 years ago, close to 30 years ago. And he was working in this very lucrative finance job. And his boss said, "You're crazy to do this." And he, as the story goes, he took a walk and he thought to himself, like, what am I going to regret when I'm 80? And he said, "I'll regret not taking this shot." And so the idea was to, optimize for avoiding future regrets. There's a downside of that too, because there's some other research. Barry Schwartz is famous for this in decision making about the difference between maximizers and satisficers. That is, maximizers try to make every decision so that it's the very, very best that they can do, and satisficers make decisions saying, "Okay, that's good enough." And what the research tells us is that maximizers do a little bit better, but they're freaking miserable. And so, I think what we want to do is, in our optimization, is we want to avoid big regrets and just satisfice and everything like that. So, for instance, true story. So I was in an airport today. I just flew in today. I was in the Albany airport. All right. It's 11:30 a.m. and I'm starving. All right. So I have like Chick-fil-A chicken nuggets. All right. So I sort of regret that. Okay. Because it's not optimal nutrition and I actually don't feel great right now. All right. But, the thing is like, if at that point I tried to optimize for future regrets, every single decision, you're going to go crazy. And what we should be doing is optimizing for the decisions, for the things we know we're going to regret. And here's the thing. There's a principle of social science minted by Dan Gilbert, which is brilliant. He says, it's hard to follow. He says, most people are like most people. Okay. And most people, because they're like most people, don't realize they're like most people. All right. Most of us are fairly similar. And so I can make a pretty safe bet of what I and other people will regret in the future. And here's what it is. If only I'd done the work. If only I'd taken the shot. If only I'd done the right thing. If only I'd reached out. And so what we should be doing is maximizing for those and really just satisficing on a lot more stuff. Really just satisficing on a lot more stuff.
Okay, so let's go back to, we've just taken a detour, a good one, into anticipation of regret.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about processing of existing regrets. Another thing you recommend, and this seems to come up in like at least a plurality of my interviews on this show, but one of the things you recommend is self-compassion.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit more?
First of all, I'm so glad that it does come up so often, because I have to say, when I was working on this, it was actually a new concept to me. Huh. I didn't know very much about it. And so for your listeners who missed the previous 37 episodes on self-compassion, it's an idea started by Kristen Neff at the University of Texas. And it has to do with, what do we do in the face? Let's take a regret. What do we do in the face of a regret? And what it tells us is that, or in a mistake. And what it tells us is that we should treat ourselves with kindness rather than contempt. Period. I mean, that's basically what it is. Treat yourself with kindness rather than contempt. A lot of people, especially a lot of high achievers, when they screw up, when they make a mistake, their self-talk is absurd. It's brutal. It's vicious. It's lacerating. And what Kristen Neff's research tells us is don't do that. All right. We have research on self-esteem, modest boost. We have research on lacerating self-criticism, does almost nothing for performance, but self-compassion does something for performance. So the key here is, when you have a regret, treat yourself with kindness rather than contempt. Don't treat yourself better than anybody else, but don't treat yourself worse than anybody else. And also recognize that your regrets are part of the human experience. You're not that. I mean, at some level, you're not that special. Any regret. If I walk down the street here in Washington and pulls and just taps them on the shoulder and say, "What's your big regret?" I can find that regret in my database in 94 seconds. We're just not that special. And so you're not that special. Everybody has regrets. Treat yourself with kindness. Don't treat yourself worse than anybody else. And that is a way to begin some of this sense making.
What's so interesting about self-compassion, and I'm a major proponent of it, and Kristen has been on the show many times and is a friend, and so I'm in the tank. What's so interesting about it is it's a paradox in some ways that like you can't change until you accept yourself. Does that make sense what I'm pointing to?
Absolutely. I mean, I know this is a secular show, but I was going to say amen. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, somehow we've gotten the belief that treating ourselves poor, that I think there's a thing with high achievers too, that they think that lacerating self-criticism is somehow motivating, that it's going to improve their performance, that being tough on themselves in that way. And there's no evidence of that. I mean, there really isn't. The other way to look at this, the way I look at it, and believe me, like I know about lacerating self-criticism. All right, I have like a master's, all but dissertation on PhD in lacerating self-criticism. And the thing is, if you were to broadcast my self-talk, the way I talk to myself, if I were in an organization and you were to take my self-talk, the way I talk to myself, and I were to talk that way to somebody else, HR would be in my office in 10 minutes. Somehow we haven't quite gotten that message. I think it seems maybe for certain people, self-compassion seems superficially soft, but the evidence is overwhelming that it is a performance enhancer.
Amen. Back at you. Yet another thing you recommend is self-distancing. What does that entail?
Well, here's a way to think about it sort of sequentially. So you start by like exercising some self-compassion by treating yourself with kindness rather than contempt. Then you maybe disclose, you talk about it, you write about it to make sense of it. But what you have to do is you have to extract a lesson from it. You have to learn from it, all right? You can't just say, oh, everybody has regrets, I have a regret. End of story. No, that doesn't make you better. What you want to do is you actually want to think about it, saying, okay, what lesson am I learning from this that I can carry forward? And here we confront, which you might have done shows on too, is Solomon's paradox. All right, Solomon's paradox, which is that this principle in psychology, named after, surprisingly, King Solomon, who was this wise and sagacious guy who totally mucked up his own life. And what it tells us is that human beings are pretty good decision makers, but we stink at making decisions in our own life many times. That we approach our own life, we're too close to things. We approach our own lives like scuba divers in the water when we should be approaching them like oceanographers. And self-distancing is a way to look at our lives in a different way. So there's some interesting research showing that in self-talk, if I say to myself, I need to return phone calls and emails faster or else people think I'm rude. All right. I could say, you need to return phone calls and emails faster. So shift from first person to second person. Or Dan needs to return. So that kind of distancing. There's some other, I'll give you the single best decision-making. I'm going to see your Jeremy ad and raise you a heuristic. Or I'm going to give you the single best decision-making heuristic that I know, which is somebody comes to you for advice and someone says, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And just, it helps if you stroke your chin a little bit beforehand, stroke your chin and say, okay, what would you tell your best friend to do? Mm-hmm. And people immediately know. So when you have this regret, okay, you say, okay, what would I tell my best friend to do in the face of this regret? You can do things like, what would the me of 10 years from now want me to do in this situation? All right, you get away from that. For all of your business listeners, Andy Grove, the former CEO of Intel, had a brilliant self-distancing move where he said that when he was facing a tough decision as an executive and he didn't know what to do, he would always ask himself, if I were replaced tomorrow, what would my successor do? And he always knew. And so again, we're often very close to we're often too close to our we know too much. We're too enmeshed in the details sometimes to make good decisions about our own lives, particularly things that are painful, that are emotionally fraught. And so explicitly saying, what would I tell my best friend to do? What would I do if I were replaced? What does the me of 10 years from now want me to do? That can be really, really useful. And there's some really fascinating research on that as well, showing the power of that.
This is really helpful. In my mind, there are two bodies of work that have been on parallel paths, but that, and you're probably familiar with both of these bodies of work in psychological research, but they really they meld well in my mind. So there's self-compassion.
Yeah.
And in Kristen's work, she recommends often what's called the mindful self-compassion break, which consists of three parts. The first is mindfulness, just seeing clearly this is a moment of suffering. The second is, and you referenced this, acknowledging universality, common humanity. I'm not the only one with this problem. And then the third is to talk to yourself the way you would talk to a good friend. And so that's self-compassion. And then there's also the work of Ethan Kross at the University of Michigan, who's also been on the show a couple of times. And he's the one who's really shown that if you talk to yourself using self-distancing, and you reference this, using your own name, that you can, that it can be more effective. And so it's like the third part of the mindful self-compassion break of like talking to yourself the way you would talk to a good friend. And then adding in this distant self-talk, to use the term of art, seems to be like to supercharge the whole thing.
I think that I write about both Neff's work and Ethan's work, and I think they're powerful, and I think they go together well. And we haven't been, I think what's interesting here is that we haven't, and we'll throw in Pennebaker and make it a hat trick. We haven't been. We have a lot of research on that. I think let me make an observation that might be interesting. So we have evidence of this. We have science behind these things, and we know how to do this. And yet we're not equipped to do it, and we haven't been taught how to do it. But I think what's interesting is that that's in the secular world. In the religious world, there are mechanisms, rituals, practices that are rooted in these same kinds of ideas that people do. So, in Catholicism, it's confessional. You unburden yourself. You transmute your amorphous emotion to a disclosure that says what it is. You get some guidance from an authority on what to do next. Jews have a whole day of the year that is about atonement, where you're forced to reckon with that.
Yes.
There are other rituals in Judaism where you take a mistake or regret, I can't think of what it's called, and you light it on fire. And you throw it into the river. And so we have, and some of the, the mindfulness stuff, as you know better than anybody, is rooted in some forms of Buddhism. And so, the secular world, though, hasn't equipped us to deal with this universal painful emotion. The religious world has. It's developed these rituals and mechanisms, things like that. But if we look to the science, and I think you're exactly right, Neff, Kross, Pennebaker as well, and many other people, it's giving us instructions about how to live our lives more fully, how to live our lives better. When we know that our lives are going to have pain, they're going to have unpleasantness. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to screw up. We're going to feel bad part of the time. And I just feel like in especially in America, we haven't been taught in a secular world how to reckon with that, which is why, Dan, it's why, your books, your stuff is so popular, because people need that kind of mindfulness. They need a practice, they need a ritual, they need a set of tools to make sense of a complex world and also to make sense of a flawed self.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I also, I just do want to acknowledge and agree with your point that there's a lot to be learned. Even for those of us who have some wariness when it comes to organized religion, there's a lot to be learned. And you described the show earlier as secular. I would say it's like, to a certain extent, yes. Yeah. But it's like more syncretic. It's like
nice. Okay, you're it's 2-1 now.
Yeah, that you owe me one. It's like what works, and I'll take it. What works from any tradition.
But here's the thing. If you look at if like I'm doing some research now on wisdom, and if you look at what psychologists and scientists have learned about wisdom, and you look at some of the wisdom traditions that were that were minted well before we had anything close to the scientific method, there's a lot of similarities.
Yes.
And even if you look at what, if you look at some of these regrets too, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting about these 4 regrets, it took me a while to get there, is that they give us instruction. Okay. So we can have, like, in a given moment, you can have a regret, you can treat yourself with self-compassion, you can disclose it and write about it, you can extract a lesson from it through self-distancing. But at a broad level, regret teaches us something else too, because what I discovered in interviewing all these hundreds of people about their regrets is that when we know what people regret the most, we know what they value the most.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is actually really important. So you go back to this all the decisions we make. Yesterday or today, let's think today. Today, I don't know, I probably made 70 decisions in the course of the day. Tomorrow, I'm going to not even remember. Tomorrow, I'm not going to remember most of them. But there's certain kinds of decisions and actions and inactions from a year ago, from 5 years ago, from 10 years ago, that 20 years ago, that not only do we remember them, they bug us. Like, that is an incredibly strong signal. And these 4 regrets that we surfaced in this big world regret survey, I think they operate as a reverse image of what people want out of life. What do people want out of life? I think foundation regrets are about stability. A good life is stable. A good life is not precarious. A good life is not, wobbling underneath your feet. Moral regrets. A good life is good, right? A good life is true and just. Every religious tradition teaches us that. Boldness regrets. I think that boldness regrets are about mortality, in a sense. That we know we're going to die, right? And you're here for this, like, vanishingly short amount of time. Like, when are you going to step up? Like, my God, you're not here forever. Why don't you ask Shirley out on a date? You're not going to be here forever. Why don't you start that cake baking business? Whatever, And then connection regrets are about love. So what do we want out of life? We want some stability. We want some goodness. We want some growth, and we want love. And so again, these negative emotions, particularly this kind of like apex negative emotion of regret, is giving us the tools and it's giving us the insights to lead our lives with greater richness, with greater fullness, with greater love.
Well said. I just want to touch on a few of more strategic suggestions from you before I let you go. You talk about starting a regret circle. What is that?
Yeah, so this is something that some people have done. There's certain kinds of group practices that are kind of interesting in here. So what you can do is you basically, gather your friends. Everybody talks about a regret that they have, and but the key here. So you have that. So what you have is you have the disclosure. You have the sense of solidarity that you're not alone. But what you also have is you're enlisting. Let's say you have 6 people. You're enlisting 5 other people to help you see what you should do. So you're overcoming Solomon's paradox in that. And so that's one thing. The other thing that you sometimes see, it's a really interesting story. There's been some few feature stories about it, but people doing obituary parties so that they will gather with their friends and then write their obituary and read it. So what you're doing is you are going forward in time and imagining backward. There's a famous story about Alfred Nobel, where he woke up one morning in the late 1800s, and in this French paper, he saw his obituary, right? But they mistook him for his brother Ludwig, and so he's a little bit wigged out by reading his obituary. But what really wigged him out was the headline, which is, forgive my bad French, Le Marchand de Mort est mort. All right, the merchant of death is dead. It's very important when I speak French to sound like Peter Sellers, as you can tell. The merchant of death is dead. And he's like, wait a second, I'm this great industrialist. I'm this great human being. And they're calling me in my obituary the merchant of death. because he invented dynamite, he had munitions factories, etc. He had invented dynamite, blasting caps. He's a great inventor, a great chemist. But what he invented were things that went boom, basically. Dynamite, blasting caps, and he actually, when he finally did die, like 20 years later, to his family's surprise, he changed his will. It didn't leave any money to them, but left all his money to start the Nobel Prizes because he had that glimpse of his obituary, and he knew what people would say about him. So people have sometimes obituary parties where they'll write their obituary and read it to other people. So there is a sense out there that people do want to reckon with these negative things. They just don't know how. And as you were mentioning before, some of the academic work from people like Kristen and Ethan can help really help people do that.
Last question, because then we're going to run out of time. One of the other things you recommend is to adopt a journey mindset. What does that mean?
Yeah. There's some interesting research. Jennifer Acker has done some of this research on how, and it sounds, basically there's something called in psychology that we've all confronted called the arrival fallacy, where we think as soon as I get, I'll give you my own life. Okay, arrival fallacy. My first book is like, it's like, oh my God, I really want a book on the bestseller list. All right, and once I get a book on the bestseller list, I'm going to feel great. All right, so I get a book on the bestseller list, and it feels great for a day. And then I'm like, oh shit, what can I do to stay on for next week? All right. So it's like, and so what you have to do is actually not fall for that. And instead just sort of enjoy, focus on the journey. And there's some very good, there's some research from Jennifer Acker at Stanford, as I mentioned, showing that people who really do say, I'm doing this interview with Dan Harris, not to try to peddle my books to try to achieve some instrumental end, but because it's part of my own exploration of these ideas, because it's an interesting conversation, because I'm on the path to talk about things that really matter. And as cheesy as that sounds, there's some very good evidence that approach is psychologically healthy.
Notwithstanding the fact that you just said what you said, as we vector toward our final seconds here, can I just get you to remind the audience of the name of your book and also your previous books, because people may want to go deeper on this subject and others that you have touched?
The name of this book is The Power of Regret: How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward. And I have a bunch of other books whose titles I don't really want to recite, but you can find them at your favorite bookseller or at danpink.com, DANPINK.com. I'm in my mid, I've been around for a while. I'm in my mid 50s, which means that I just turned 61.
The last thing I just want to say to you is, first of all, it's ridiculous, and this is my fault, that I'm interviewing you about this book 3 years after it came out. So I just want to beg you, and this is not to shift the blame here, but just to beg you that anything you're doing anytime, you should pitch me directly or my team, because you are on a short list of people that I and we will always support. So
that's very kind of you. I appreciate that. I'm now in the midst of a midlife. I'll spare you the full contours of my midlife crisis, but I'm now doing a bunch of different crazy things that I'm not sure will ever work or why I'm doing it. But that's another story. But if I ever have any work product that's worth promoting, I'll call you.
I'm your boy. Hit me up. Daniel Pink, huge pleasure. Thank you for making time for this.
Okay, I've really enjoyed it, Dan. Thanks so much for having me. Take care.